Carried. And we will, since that only took a couple of minutes, going to move on to the next paper. So move on to the Discretionary Response Fund. Welcome Sam up to the table. Hang on a sec. There's going to be some questions and things, so we will have a mover and second, but that's fine. Sam, if you'd like to, so we've got a series of grants and things on today's agenda. At the beginning of each, I'd like you to just give a quick outline of the grant and the criteria.
Thanks. Chair. So Discretionary Response Fund exists to assist community groups where their project funding requests fall outside of other council funding criteria or timing, closing dates, etc. The fund is also for emergency or unforeseen situations. The Metro Discretionary Response Fund annually, in recent times, has been $135,000. There's a staff delegation up to $15,000. The fund remains open while there's funds in it, and applications are processed as they come in. The panel at a staff level meets on a monthly basis. And that's how we get to here where we are today.
Great, thank you. Any questions on this one? Mike?
It's a bit of a generic question, actually, because we obviously have a lot of community funding pots, and we're coming up to the new financial year shortly. And I'm just wondering if we'll be revisiting the apportionment of strengthening communities funds between community boards before the next financial year.
I'm not sure that that's a matter for this paper on DRF.
No.
Perhaps my colleagues may wish to speak to that.
Help with that.
John?
Yeah, Councillor Davidson, that's not on the agenda at the moment, but if Council has a different view, we can consider it.
Okay, so we've got a series of grants. What I will ask is there a funding review happening generally to look at the various grants, what they're for and whether they need tweaking in any way?
So there has been a funding review which came to a natural pause, let's say, or closure in December 2018, and so we're now working from the basis of that review.
Did that cover all of the grants, or mainly the strengthening community? So did it cover the sort of capital endowment fund and all of the other ones?
It covered all of the community-based grants that come to this. Didn't include heritage, but it covered capital endowment, sports and events and festivals, strengthening communities, DRF. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So,
Is it on the agenda?
I just want to make sure that actually before we get to the end of the financial year that something's in place to review actually the funding grants and the apportionment between community boards, and it's just making sure we've got that signal that needs to be
So
done.
that's not appropriate as a resolution on this particular paper, but we can look at where it might be appropriate for us to get that work done.
Well, I guess the problem is if we don't start initiating it
That's
now,
right.
we're going to run out of time.
Yeah, so we'll work out whether there's a will to do that or not. Anne, and then Andrew. Yep, absolutely.
Thank you. Okay. Hello. Thanks for your work. I'm just interested in what is the revenue from the ticket sales? Whether that's, I can't see that anywhere, and because we've grown in numbers, there's 16,500 participants at $20 average per ticket. That seems a lot of money. I'm just wondering how that is factored into the decision in terms of funding support from council.
So my apologies, I'm stepping in for my colleague who's away sick today, so I haven't got the full information with me, but we'll pull that up.
I may be able to pull up the specifics, but I would say generally the word festival does make a surplus. It runs every 2 years, and then that surplus is spent in the non-year to get the ball rolling for future things. So they obviously have I am led to believe, a strong focus on gaining as much commercial revenue as possible from ticket sales, sponsorship, etc. And then council funding is there to supplement.
So basically, it's reinvested into the festival. Any profit that's
Absolutely.
made, obviously.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Anything else, Ian?
I'm sort of feeling I'd like a wee bit more clarity about that, just given that we're giving $30,000 to them and nothing to Living Springs. So kind of trying to understand that.
Sure.
Okay, maybe if you go, so if you look at, maybe describe what we've been able to support Word with in the past, why this application's with us now instead of its normal process?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So we've supported them with $30,000 out of Strengthening Communities funding round for their past festival, and some of the costs associated with that. So just to clarify, they apply to Events and Festivals Fund every second year when their event's on, and they've received $25,000, and that goes towards cost of the event, no staffing costs, but of course it takes staff to run things too, and so they normally previously have come to Strengthening Communities for some of those staffing costs. They missed the round based on possibly some misunderstanding or misinformation, and then have come through the DRF because of that in time for their event.
Thank you. Anything further, Anne, before I move to Andrew? I can come back to you if you like. Okay, Andrew.
So, following on from what you've just said, it would be easy to see that, or it would be easy to put an argument that Living Springs is actually the victim of that process, which has run differently than it perhaps would normally have done. I share Anne's view that for Living Springs to be assessed as priority 3 because the Word Festival is a higher priority or a more immediate priority probably is a little bit unfair on Living Springs. So that leads me to my question. Do Living Springs have the ability to reapply perhaps in the next financial year so that we could then consider their application in perhaps a more level playing field type of environment?
Can I
With
just-
this Strengthening Communities round opening next month,
Right.
they could apply to that fund, or possibly other funds from other funders as well.
So if this was to carry today with the staff recommendation, so nothing for Living Springs, would you work with Living Springs to make sure that they know what their opportunities are to put an application into that next funding round?
Yes.
Yep, and you would do that actively?
Yep.
Yep, excellent.
Councillor, could I add that the principal reason for the decision not to recommend supporting Living Springs at this time is because the project is not urgent. There's no sort of real burning platform.
Yeah.
The Strengthening Communities funding round has opened and will work with Living Springs to make sure they hit that. It's the opposite with the Word Festival. Their processes are underway. They have an event in August. They missed the deadline. It was their fault. But council does make provision for organisations such as that to apply for funding should the council decide to assist. So really it's a decision for the council, the committee, whether they want to help the Word Festival at this late stage.
All right, and my second question, there's 13,000 and something left in this fund. If we approve these applications according to the staff recommendations today, are there likely to be calls on that fund? Have you got other applications that you're working on in this funding period that would see that 13,000 called on?
So to answer that, when we got to the situation just before Christmas, knowing these applications would come to you in February and that they were greater than the balance, knowing that you could choose to grant the full amount, we closed the fund, the Discretionary Response Fund, so people couldn't apply. We are aware that there's a number of groups who will look at it and would have applied had they had the chance, but we have made it unavailable. Based on your decisions today on how much is left in the fund, we'll either reopen it or not. But as you can see from the list of those we've funded, it's a common fund to be applied to, so there will be other applications in the pipeline that would like to apply.
Do you know of any?
Not specifically, but I know there will be, but I can't tell you what they are.
Because another option could be to look at granting the 13,000 to Living Springs, but would that be sufficient for them to undertake their project, or do they need the 30,000?
Okay, so they could undertake part of their project, so there's 3 stages to that. One is sorting out the cabling, the electronic cabling around the centre, and the cost of that is approximately $13,000. The downside of doing that is it does fully exhaust the fund, therefore the aspect of the fund that is for emergencies that come along, there'd be nothing there at all until the next financial year, which is up to councillors, but just to be aware of that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, are there any further questions? Melanie, then Yanni.
So why has 30,000 been recommended rather than another value?
For the Word Festival?
Yeah.
And again, I apologise, my colleague assessed this application. My understanding is the original discussion was around a requirement of around $50,000 to cover positions to deliver youth and children's projects. The 30,000, I guess, is recognising where perhaps we're more comfortable funding, the level we're more comfortable funding at, and being aware of the pull on the fund and the availability of funds in the area.
I can also assist here. Obviously, I review and sign off the decision-making process. In this instance, I asked that the officers go back to the Word Festival and ask the question, do you actually need $30,000 for this to happen? Would anything less suffice? The information we got back is we are short $30,000. We need that. We actually need a little more. 50,000 would help, but 30,000 is essential. That's why we're recommending it. Added to that, the event is in August, so there's not a lot of time to make alternative arrangements, but that is principally taking their word for it as an established event partner within Christchurch.
So as a follow-up, and I love books, but if we weren't to fund this at all, maybe, would it not go ahead?
So I spoke with the applicant this morning, knowing that that's the question that might be asked, and their answer essentially was the event could still go ahead, however it would leave them in financial deficits into the following year, because of course they've got ongoing costs and they rely on this event to cover their costs over a 2-year period, because it's an event only every 2 years. And I can answer Anne's earlier question about ticket sales, etc.
Yeah.
So their revenue derives from sponsorship at $138,000. Registration fees is estimated to be $200,000, and then grants make up approximately $150,000. So grants make up approximately a third, or maybe just less than a third of their revenue, and then their costs are predominantly the cost of producing the event and the staff and contracting fees.
Well, thank you for that. So we're looking at about a $500,000 event every 2 years.
Yeah.
So what is the threshold for Christchurch NZ in terms of events?
I don't think they have a cost of event, and it may be my colleague Nigel, if he's here, can answer that better. But they have a threshold around the scale of the event and the impact on the city,
Right.
but which you set, I believe, through some strategy documents. So they look at that each year.
Yeah. Okay. Yanni.
I was just keen to understand how much money Word had in the Word Festival has actually in the bank.
One moment.
And I was interested to know how much of that is tagged versus how much of that is untagged.
If you give us half a moment to bring the
Yeah.
information up on the Fund Force system, we'll do our best to assist.
And then just a supplementary question relative to that is there anything we've seen in terms of what they've presented in terms of a significant change in costs? Because although in here it says it's a sort of, an event that's held every 2 years, they're actually now doing all these events during the off year as well. And so I just kind of wonder whether we're actually funding 2 separate things or one thing, or if there's been, they're incurring significant additional costs in terms of things like the types of venues that they're hiring, or the way in which the staff are being remunerated.
They do have an ongoing program, so they will work with touring authors and present work throughout the year. In relation to the festival period itself, they're wanting to have a very strong children and youth focused component, and they're also wanting to strengthen their reach into diverse communities and encourage and support writers into those communities in spaces that are safe and accessible, if that's an appropriate way to go. So it is a change, a slight change in the program.
Thank you. And then Melanie?
I'm just wondering if we should perhaps give staff the opportunity to get some of the answers in terms of, it seems that there is a wee bit of disquiet about some of the situation. I don't know, maybe I'm picking that up wrong, but could we break for lunch and then continue after?
What questions do you need further information on? I think Sam's got some information now.
I can answer Yanni's question about their financial position. So their latest financial accounts at time of application was to the end of the year, December 2018, and they had accumulated funds of $150,000. So that represents approximately 4 months working capital, depending on the year, because some years are more expensive. And when they presented their most up-to-date bank statement back in September, the balance in their account was about $15,000.
So it fluctuates widely depending on running of events and ticket sales and grants and when things come in.
But they're not sitting on a war chest of cash.
No. Okay, thank you.
As it's September.
September, that's quite a while ago now.
But then sponsorship will be coming in and going out, but they're not sitting on a heap of money that they could be spending on this. They're managing their finances responsibly, I would take from this, because we expect groups to have some working capital in their accounts.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So I've got Melanie, then Anne again.
I just wanted a wee bit more information on what you said about youth and diversity. Is there anything specific you can mention about what they're planning?
Not that I'm aware of it, and again I apologise. What I'm aware that they've referenced is that they want to strengthen the work in that area in response to diminishing calibre of results for literacy and for children and young people in New Zealand. So they're wanting to actively respond to that by creating opportunities for children and young people. They have had school programs that they have offered. I think they're looking at building those up. That's my understanding.
And to add to that, they do have a proposal around some work in that space that they are seeking some funding around. It's in, it's not part of this application because it's a complementary piece of work, but I'm sure that we could connect you with the group, if appropriate, to see more detail on that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anne?
I'm not sure if this is a fair question either, but in terms of employment costs, staff costs, is that something that you look at when you're considering a balance sheet?
Do you mean like how good how high their wages are, or
No,
do you mean
no.
what percentage of their costs do they have at an appropriate level of staffing?
Well, no, I just noticed that they bring on extra staffing for when they're preparing for the festival. I'm just wondering, hours, that sort of thing.
Not to that detail.
No.
But certainly it's appropriate when an event is being staged to have more people come on board to help
Right.
deliver those
Yep.
events.
And part of their application does include job descriptions for those. We don't just say, "I'll just throw a figure in." Those details are part of the application. They are looked at when assessing for appropriateness.
Yeah. And I also note that we didn't ask similar questions around the heritage grant and whether they were paying contractors too much and those kind of things. I think there's often a tendency to do that for not-for-profits. So any further questions? Jimmy, then Yanni.
On the application form, the applicant emphasized they will begin process in late November last year when we recruit a new employer contract workers. So whether they already recruit those contract workers or not yet, or still going on waiting for this kind of funding.
They are starting to recruit. They need to for the timing of their event, and they'll be doing that out of potential deficit funding in the hope that they will attract the funding. If you know what I
So
mean.
already on duty. already, these staff?
Some will be being recruited. I can't tell you the specifics.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Yanni, and then I think we might wind this one up.
I was just wondering, you know, in terms of the conversation with Christchurch NZ, it seems to me that this could be quite a significant event, and maybe the Christchurch NZ stuff, I mean, when you think about some of the things they're funding, which would have a lot less attendance than what this festival has, it does seem a bit weird that they don't just pick it up, support it, promote it, especially if I think we've put in our statement of intent around the idea of our companies focusing on the social
just point
impact.
out that we will have Christchurch NZ here later in the day, and
So I
because
just wanted
these
to
staff
ask,
aren't the right
no, but
people
I
to
just
ask
wanted to
about
ask
that.
staff if it was possible to have a conversation with Christchurch NZ around the future of the festival, particularly when we've just heard there's another element to it.
Yeah. So what we might do is
I don't think it's fair
deal
to put
with that
Christchurch NZ on the spot when they're coming in for something else.
Yeah, but I mean,
I just
yeah.
thought staff could, you know, look at that if as a way forward, not in substitute of the funding, but just in terms of, you know, we've heard some other stuff that's been considered.
I mean, it's one of those things that we've already made a decision as council on the types of events and festivals that will be in either community stuff or at major events and things at Christchurch NZ. Are you looking for us to change
There's heaps of stuff,
those
like,
criteria?
Like some of the sporting events that Christchurch NZ have supported would have less than 15,000 people attending. So I don't quite understand why, and maybe we just need to tweak something.
Yep.
Because it seems kind of weird that we would be having Christchurch NZ funding things that have less amount of people attending.
I'm sorry, we've been dragging on
Yeah,
for
we
this on a
have.
very long
This
time.
has had so many questions.
It's getting
Can
a bit
we please-
ridiculous. Can we?
Right, we
yeah.
don't need an answer on this one right now because it's not relevant to the actual decision we're making. So what I'd like you to do is to give us some information on the funding arrangements that Christchurch NZ have, the ones that we do, and any
Future opportunities.
future opportunities for those. We don't need a resolution. It's just we'll follow up on it. Yeah. Okay, Aaron was going to move this.
Oh.
I know, he said so right at the very beginning. It was we were going to go to lunch at 12:30. Andrew.
I might be about to frustrate that because I'd like to signal an amendment if I can, once it's moved and seconded, or otherwise I'd be happy to move
Okay,
it amended.
Pauline has seconded it. Okay, what we might do is, I'm assuming that you're going to ask for funding for Living Springs.
Yeah,
We'll
so I've got-
set them separately.
Yeah, so I've got two additional paragraphs that...
Paragraphs?
So two additional resolutions.
Pages.
that I've got two additional resolutions that I'd like to put by way of amendment.
Okay, are they both about Living Springs?
Yes, they are.
Okay, can I move the word festival funding first, and then we'll get to that?
Well, no, because
Are you
what I'm
looking at
about to
cutting
put
one
may
funding?
change people's view of this one.
Okay, so you're potentially looking at cutting one as well.
No,
Okay.
but it would be probably
Read them
good to...
out.
If we can deal with the amendment
Yep.
first, because, yeah, okay, so approves a grant. So this is the first resolution of an amendment. Approves a grant of $13,036 from its 2019-20 Metropolitan Discretionary Response Fund to Living Springs towards phase 1 of its Wi-Fi upgrade project. So that's the first resolution. And then the second, requests staff to work with Living Springs on potential further funding applications for the further phases of this project. And that's intended to make it clear that the 13,000 is for that phase 1, not that we would consider that to be the whole contribution to the project necessarily.
Sure.
Just can you remind me, we gave Living Springs some money last year for something to do with water?
Yeah, so they needed urgently to upgrade their water provision under the Ministry of Health,
Yep.
water or whatever,
You will.
and that was the Capital Endowment Fund for $80,000.
80,000, that's right. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so
All right.
bearing in mind that this has been moved and seconded, I'm going to take the 13,000 as a foreshadowed motion.
No, it's an amendment.
Excuse me, hang on a sec. the recommendation, oh, it's only got one of them there? Hang on a sec. So the recommendation doesn't even cover the other one?
No.
It doesn't cover a not approve? Okay. Second resolution. So can I just point out for next, for the next report, if there's a recommendation not to fund something, because it says amount recommended that's zero, that there needs to actually be a recommendation in blue on the page that says, because then it would have been a direct negative.
Yeah.
So we can only amend it if the next move and second are agreed, can't we?
No, we put it as a separate one. So Aaron and Pauline, you have the option of either accepting that as part of your resolution, or we put it separately as an amendment.
Yeah, separately as amendment as well. I was originally a little miffed as to why they weren't being funded, and then I had a thought about it, and as a parent, I think camps without Wi-Fi is a great thing.
Okay, so the first question then is, Andrew, do you have a seconder? Mike. Okay. So we have an amendment that is for $13,000 odd that's going up on the screen. It's coming. What I will do is have one round of debate that covers both the amendment and the substantive. So please talk to both grants and why you might or might not be supporting those. And then I will put the amendment and then I will put the substantive. Okay? So we will have a speaking list, it might be 1 o'clock after all, depends on how many people speak. Okay, so Andrew, then Pauline, Anne, anyone else at this stage? People might. Okay, Andrew. Can we have the timer up, please?
Great, thank you. I'm happy to support the word festival as it's put there, but I also think, given the opportunity, given that we've got the $13,034 sitting there, given an expectation has been raised that the fund is close to further applications and we've got a new round starting soon, we may as well grant this to Living Springs so that they can get on with this project. The Wi-Fi project for Living Springs is essentially a capacity building project. You will note the increasing deficit that's in the matrix, and you'll note the comments that Wi-Fi is really an integral part of the offering that allows them to continue to take bookings and offer full service to those people that are using the facility. Living Springs opened its doors to the community after the earthquakes and continues to do so. They add huge value socially from a community viewpoint. They're a leader in terms of biodiversity work and ecology and environmental work, and in the area of education as well. They actually offer people, children in particular, that otherwise wouldn't have the opportunity for an outdoors experience and that type of educational experience to experience all of that in a very good quality way. Getting this Wi-Fi in place will improve connectivity, which means that there'll be a higher level of attractiveness to a number of groups booking the facility, and not least to some of those current users. I think it's just an investment in the future of a facility that actually is a huge asset to the city.
Thank you very much. Pauline.
Yeah, thank you. Look, we did hear that the Wi-Fi is not an urgent project, and we also heard that the 13,000 sitting in there is a really good thing to have for any emergency. I also felt that we didn't really dig into the Living Springs application as deeply as we could have. We didn't ask a lot of questions about, well, actually, have they looked at other sources? Is that 30k the appropriate amount? It seems like a lot to me for a Wi-Fi upgrade. But I don't know, I'm just a layperson. We did give them 80,000 last year. begs the question of really, are they reaching out for other funders? I don't know. There's questions we didn't ask, or I didn't ask enough about that, because I really thought that we were going to support the zero for now being the staff recommendation, and look at that later on because it's not urgent. So I won't be supporting that option to use up the last of that fund at this stage, because we do need to have a little bit there just for the odd emergency that does come up. So I'll be supporting the original motion.
Thank you. I've got Anne, then James.
I want to just ditto to Andrew's great comments. I think the disquiet for me has been about the fact that we're comparing not apples with apples, and we know that there is an income coming through ticket sales with Word Festival. We know that Living Springs doesn't charge anything for their kids to come there, or if they do, the kids don't have to pay, other people pay. I think they do an amazing job at supporting the community, and it just feels, I think Andrew's amendment is a much fairer way of dealing with this, and also acknowledging that there is an emergency, an urgency to this funding for the Word Festival. However, I'd like to also suggest strongly that, that there's a bit more forward planning.
Thank you. James G.
Thank you. I will make this brief. I have an issue with the "we may as well" mantra. It's there, so let's just spend it. We have great staff. They assess these applications on their merits, and they assign a priority ranking based on that. There's one with a 1 ranking and one with a 3. That's good enough for me, not, well, there's some there, so let's just use it.
Thank you. Anyone further before Aaron wraps up? No, Aaron.
I often get told to wrap up, so thank you. And I'll be quick. All happy with the Word funding. The Living Springs one for me, and I alluded to it before, is I see it as for a Wi-Fi upgrade. Given that the majority of people that go there are children, and I realise they have some adults go with them as well. When you go on a camp, it's a really good thing to have a break from devices and Wi-Fi, and I think we'd actually receive hate mail from parents if we upgraded the Wi-Fi to give kids access to Wi-Fi when they're on blooming camp. Get out, use the Flying Fox, go on the monorail, use the trampolines, walk in the bush, dig a hole, the usual things you do on camp, but put your device down for 3 days.
Kia ora, thank you very much. And with that, sorry Yanni, I did ask before for people before Aaron wrapped up. I will put the amendment, which is the 13,000 odd towards Living Springs. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? No. I'm going to declare that lost. Did you want a division? Okay, the division, please.
Councillor Templeton?
No.
Councillor McClellan? Yes. Councillor McDonald's?
No.
Councillor Johansson? No. Councillor Galloway?
Yes.
Councillor Daniels?
No.
Councillor Coker?
No.
Councillor Chen?
No.
Councillor Scandrett?
No.
Councillor Kewen?
No.
Councillor Goff?
No.
Councillor Davidson?
Yes.
Councillor Cotter?
No.
Councillor Turner?
Yes.
I thought that was pretty clear from up here. I get kind of all of it. Okay, and with that, I will put the substantive, which is the $30,000 for the Word Festival. All those in favour? Aye. Those against? I declare that carried. Thank you very much. And with that, we will move to the lunch break, and I would like everyone back here for a 1:30 kick-off, please.